What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is Daredevil, Season 3, Episode 4, Blindsided. I'm going to save the thing that obviously needs to be talked about for last. First of all, we'll talk about some of the other stuff going on outside of Matt's story. So, kind of finally seeing Fisk and sort of the fact that he's been behind a lot of what's been going on. And I had a feeling, the way they were playing it, it made it seem too simple for him to just be like, "Oh, I'm just turning over a new leaf, guys. Like I'm a good guy now." So we're really starting to see that he does have a hand in a lot of what's going on. You know, he had some guy come and shank him in the prison to get him out of prison because the FBI felt like that would be safer. I think I don't know how he knew, but I think he also knew that the Albanians would take a shot at him once he was being taken out of prison. He somehow knows about Dex and his abilities, and he's like manipulating him by being like pretty much the only guy showing him any kindness at the moment. You know, because Dex is very good at what he does, but he's not getting recognition, and so much so that the people in charge are asking questions about him behind his back to confirm, like, okay, so did he do what he says that he did? You know, because they're finding some discrepancies because of those guys that he just shot point blank while they were unarmed and trying to surrender. But then Fisk corroborates the story, kind of lending him a little helping hand. And it's interesting. It's interesting to see that Fisk is manipulating him. But at the same time, I'm also thinking, how did Fisk know all of this was going to happen? So I will say that it seems that Fisk, I know he's supposed to be, you know, very intelligent. He's very clearly good at reading situations and planning and all of this stuff. But there are a couple times where I feel like it works out a little too well in his favor. Because again, how could he predict that the Albanians would attack and then Dex would take them all out on his own, and then he would use that because then he would know that he would take them out while also doing it, I guess, incorrectly, you know, taking them out while they're trying to surrender. All of this stuff just seems a little too like he predicted too much. I guess he's a little too OP at the moment. But then again, maybe some of it just sort of fell in his lap, and he was like, "Oh, I can use this now." But I don't know for sure. But I did have a thought whenever that one guy shanked him. I did have a thought like, did he snitch because he knew somebody would attack him, and that would get him out of prison? But then finding out that he actually just paid the guy off and then helped that guy get out of prison, it just seems so much more like Fisk that he would make that happen. So he definitely is very much in control of the situation. He's not nearly as much of a bystander as they were trying to make it seem like he was, and I kind of figured, but to see how much power he still has at the moment was pretty interesting. We've also got Foggy and Karen, you know, finding out Matt's still alive, Foggy dealing with that information in a very realistic way. You know, he's happy, but then he's also kind of like, what am I going to do about this? You know, I can't just sit on the sidelines like I knew he wasn't going to. And so trying to see what he can do, you know, he's going to run for district attorney. I like that. I like his story. Karen seems like she might be going off the deep end a little bit. I don't know. It seems a little odd what her story is right now, because of course she's pissed that Matt's alive and hasn't told them for however long he's been alive. And I think that's a very natural response. But then all of a sudden, like, she's getting a little too overboard with some of what she's doing. You know, she's randomly walking down the street, and then these guys are, you know, just kind of sitting around and, you know, whistling at women and stuff, and it's late at night. And so then she walks up on him, and they're, of course, like, "Hey, baby, you want some fun?" And then she pulls out a gun on him. And then that's where that scene ends, and there was no real point to it other than to show she's got a gun and she's willing to threaten people. And then she shows up at this woman's house who I guess works kind of with the banks because she's looking to the Shell Corporation to get the name, and she kind of like forces her way into the conversation and forces her to give her name without threatening her, though. And I thought that's why they showed that she had a gun, because we were going to see her threaten the woman with a gun at one point. But then she never does, and she's just like, "Look, just tell me the name, I'll get off your property." I did think it was also kind of funny because, again, just seeing how a lot of TV shows and a lot of movies work nowadays, they always want to be so inclusive. So much so that they'll just force it without any rhyme or reason. So then all of a sudden Karen's at this woman's door, and all of a sudden behind her you hear her wife call out to her, "Honey, is everything okay?" I'm like, oh, There's their power to the. We're equality. We're showing representation. It's like, yeah, you couldn't just write a character into the show that actually has a point other than just being a side character. You don't even get to see the spouse. She's just off screen. I just thought that was kind of funny. It was very random and forced in, but I've come to expect it. It's kind of how TV shows work nowadays, especially when it comes to mainstream. Anyways, but yeah, so Karen's story though, don't really know what's going on with her. Like, I guess she's kind of losing herself a little bit because she's so like just invested in everything, and I don't know. I think it's kind of causing her to lose her mind almost. Yeah, everything with Fisk, everything with Matt. And I do feel bad for her, honestly. Like, it's not something where she's going down this dark path, and similar to what's her name? Jessica's sister. Is it Trish? I think it's Trish. Her story was much more like she was just insanely jealous, and she for some reason started becoming more and more insane as the season went on for season 2 of Jessica Jones, and I just didn't really care, and I felt like it was very petty and very stupid and not very well written. Karen's story, it makes sense. I still don't really know where it's going at the moment, but I sympathize with her more because I do disagree with a lot of what Matt is doing. I do think he's not really handling all these situations very well, and the way he's pushing away his friends, and yeah, everything going on with Karen does suck right now. So I kind of understand why she is kind of going off the deep end a little bit. I just don't know exactly what it means for her to go off the deep end right now. Like, they haven't made that very clear, whether that's she's just willing to threaten people nonstop or she's just going too far. But whatever the case, that's pretty much it for her story. Nadim is the other kind of slightly interesting story in this one because he's kind of going through his own little personal trouble. And I honestly thought at the beginning of the season, when we first introduced to him, I thought he was going to be much more like, oh, he's Fisk's inside FBI agent. He's his man on the inside. But as this season has gone on, he's become much more of kind of a side character, honestly, to the story. He's just this FBI agent who's dealing with family problems at home because he nearly died trying to help Fisk get out of prison and get to this place. And he's just the guy that's really struggling right now. And everything he tries to do, I thought Fisk was going to be trying to use him because of how much he's been struggling. But instead, it's almost like he's just very invested in the Fisk case. And so he wants to see Fisk brought to justice, but he also wants to get his moment in the limelight, which means using Fisk to turn in all of these crime organizations and stuff. And that's kind of his story right now. It's just him trying to use Fisk, and Fisk is very clearly not one to be used, so he's playing him, but we don't really know how he's playing him yet. And I don't know, I just feel like he could have been a much more important character, but now he's kind of becoming, oh no, he's dealing with home issues. Can we get back to the story? Like, yeah, it sucks, and I do think, that conversation between him and his boss is a good one, but it's a good conversation for a different show. I'm more invested in what's going on with Daredevil, Fisk, Dex, all of their story and all the moving pieces. I'm much more invested there. So whenever you take a break to talk about Nadim and his family and how his son can't sleep because he's worried about him, it's not that Nadim's a very poorly written character. He's just not important to the story anymore. Or at least he doesn't feel like he is. He just feels like a cog in Fisk's plan. So I think they've kind of messed up with his character at the moment. So maybe they'll bring him back in and give him some more relevance, but at the moment he's just there. He's just a pawn. So that's kind of sad for him. But then we get to everything going on with Matt in this episode, and I've been talking about how some of the jump cuts have been very, very, I guess, disengaging. I don't know if that's the right word I'm looking for, but it's not Daredevil. The jump cutting, the jump cut fighting, it's just not what I come to expect in Daredevil. I expect a lot more fluid fighting. I expect a lot more like showing the action of going on. If there's going to be a jump cut, it's not going to be like several jump cuts in a row. It'll be like you show a little bit of fighting and then you cut to a different angle and you show some fighting from that angle. But there have been a couple episodes where it's been like you're shooting from this angle, and he's punch, then you jump cut to just over a little bit and he's punch. It just didn't feel right. And then we get to this episode. And yeah, I even looked it up because I was like, how long was that? It was 11 minutes. 11 minutes of one shot, starting from he gets trapped inside the nurse's office in the prison or whatever, and then Fisk calls him on the phone. They have their conversation. Then once he gets off, one shot, steps out into the hallway, 3 guys. And it was funny because as soon as they started shooting, there was a part of me that's like, is this gonna be a one shot? And then as soon as they started fighting, I was just like, yes. Like they're not cutting it all. They're following the action. You see stuff happen or you don't see stuff happen off screen, but you hear it coming, and then it jumps onto screen, and then you just know everything's going on, and you can't see all of it, but you're following it. You're kind of just behind, and then you catch up to it, and you see what's going on. You know, he gets tossed behind the seat in the nurse's office, and the next thing you know, he's all bloody, and you're like, oh, I bet they probably did some makeup on him right there. Like, that's incredible. And then they show him fighting in the nurse's office, and then he gets out of that. I'm thinking, okay, that was pretty cool. I know it was only 3 guys. It doesn't quite measure up to what we saw like in the first season or even the stairwell fight in the second season. But then they kept going. I'm just like, oh my god, like they're following down the hallway, and then there's these 2 guards that show up, and they're like, oh yeah, we got him. And he's got to fight the 2 guards off, and then he goes into another room, and then Vic the Albanian shows up, and he's talking to him, they're having a conversation, and it's still a one shot. I'm like, oh my god, they're not cutting. They're still going. And then you follow him being let out by the Albanian dressed in the guard's uniform, and then it shows him getting outside the prison, it shows him getting into the taxi, and I was just like, oh, holy crap, bravo. That was, it was just one of those things where you've done so much with the one shot in the first and second season. You know, the first season, that awesome hallway shot was just fantastic. It was cool to see him going in and out of the rooms. You hear stuff going on, and then it comes out to the hallway, and you see it happen in the hallway, and it's all done in one shot. And then the stairwell was just like you're following the action, you're seeing it all happen. So many guys he's taking down, and it's just all the way down the stairwell, and you're like, that was pretty cool. And then in this one, like, it starts off with just those 3 guys. It's like, okay, yeah, that was pretty cool. We got back to the one shots. And then just the entire sequence of him getting from the nurse's office out of the prison. It was cool. It was awesome. It got me hyped. It got me excited. I had to look up because I wanted to see how long that was. And for it to be 11 minutes of a one shot, it's just insane. Like, it blows my mind that they really went through with that and they really made it happen. Yeah, it was awesome. I will say there's a part of me that whenever he got into the taxi and they didn't show the driver, I'm thinking, okay, so it's not going to be the driver that he got there with, so it's probably going to be a bad guy since they're not actually showing him. And there's that part of me that's like, okay, Matt, like, you should know that. But then they showed him sleeping in the backseat. I'm like, okay, so he was just that exhausted where he didn't pick up on the fact that the driver was different. And I don't think the driver actually said anything now that I'm thinking about it. Like, he just gets in the car and says, drive, and the driver doesn't say anything. And then later on, he realizes, oh, this isn't the same guy. And so then they send the taxi into the lake, and obviously he's going to get out somehow. My wireless control battery level is low. Probably should have muted the TV just in case that happened. C'est la vie. But yeah, so it was definitely the best part of this episode. It was really awesome. The stuff with Fisk is still enjoyable, and with Dex as well. The Nadim stuff is not as important anymore, is not as interesting, and then the Foggy and Karen stuff is still kind of on the outside looking in, but I feel like they're kind of building up that they're going to get involved here soon, because it feels like it's all sort of closing in, and they're all about to meet in the middle to finally finish off this epic showdown that's pretty much been building up since the end of season 1. But yeah, so I'm really curious to see what they've got in store for Fisk and for Matt and for everything story-wise this season. Like, it's really well built up and it's got my interest, and yeah. So anyways, that's it for this one. On to the next one. See you there. Now episode 5, The Perfect Game. So a lot more delving into Dex's backstory here, and honestly I feel pretty bad for the guy. I mean, he's becoming, again, a pawn, in Fisk's plan, but much more directly a pawn than Nadim has become, in my opinion. Now, Nadim, we are starting to see how Fisk is going to use him. He's blaming Matt for everything that happened, which I could not remember if Fisk knew who Matt Murdock was. But clearly he didn't because, they're still talking like he's a blind guy, right? And then they're looking at the cameras and like, okay, this is no blind guy. So I don't know if they figured out that he's Daredevil or not, but clearly he knows that he is an opponent he needs to deal with. And again, as he's said multiple times, he tried to come in between him and Vanessa, so he sees him as a threat and he wants to get rid of him. So he sends Nadim after him, which, yeah, it makes sense that he's going to take that next step. As far as Nadim is concerned, like, it's interesting because I actually understand, but it's still one of those things where it's like you're very clearly getting played by Fisk, and the fact that you just absolutely trust him, when Matt was, I don't think he was directly the one that put him away, but like his best friends are ones that helped put Fisk away, and they're trying to keep him locked away. And so the fact that they're fighting this hard for it, you would think that them being best friends of Matt, they would know if he was working for Fisk and they would not want anything to do with him, but they're still protecting him. So clearly there's something else going on here. So I hope he can figure it out because he doesn't seem stupid, but at the same time, like, he sees, I could see him getting such like a big head over everything because he wants this win. He wants to take down all these people that Fisk was involved with, and he sees Fisk as such a big prize that I could see him getting blinded by his desire to get the job done. And so even though Fisk is clearly lying to him, he might be blinded and not be able to see that. Which actually is kind of ironic. He has vision, but he's actually blinder than Matt at the moment because he's just so badly wants to do his job. So yeah, I don't know where they're going to take his story, but he is becoming more involved in this episode, and I really like that. I'm glad he's not just on the periphery and we're just watching him have to deal with family trouble. I think the family trouble is kind of building up to show how badly he wants to take all these people down that Fisk is going to give him, which is why he's so readily believing everything Fisk is telling him. But yeah, Dex was definitely the focus of this episode. The title, Perfect Game, it's talking about his desire to pitch that perfect game as a kid. So his story was very interesting, seeing him grow up as a kid. He has that perfect game, but he grew up with a family that didn't really treat him well and then died. And so he had to deal with that from a young age. And yeah, it messed him up, and then he goes to this therapist, and the therapist gives him some help, but then she ends up contracting cancer, and then she dies. So it's just not a great upbringing, but he's managed to kind of put some things into perspective. He's managed to kind of work out his life to where everything is kind of working out for him, and even though he's very creepily doing it, he found that one girl that worked at Suicide Hotline, and he's kind of fixated on her, and she's kind of his North Star, like the therapist called it. He's found that balance to keep himself in check, but now Fisk is kind of like, no, we need to upset that balance. And I find it interesting that he's going to use him as kind of like, he's going to be the new villain, because he said it very poignantly, and it's very true. Even, in today, sometimes it helps to just give the public something to be distracted by so they don't notice all of the other things going on behind the scenes. I would argue that happens every day for us. Media nowadays is it's bought out. It's not about just telling stories anymore. It's about, we're going to feed you this narrative, and it doesn't matter what media outlet you watch. They're all feeding you a narrative, and it's whatever they want you to see to keep you distracted from what's actually going on. And so Fisk is using that to his advantage. He's going to create this villain. She was talking about how she got some nice job here at the hotel. Well, Fisk's shell corporation just bought out the hotel, so he's probably the one that gave her the job. He's the one that gave Dex the chance to meet up with her again. And then he knew, because Dex unfortunately is not very socially capable, he probably knew that he was going to mess it up, let it slip that he's been stalking her, and then she leaves him, and now he's going to spiral. So very clever setup in that regard. And it is a little coincidental, the fact that Dex does slip up. Pretty much everybody probably saw it coming. But there is a part of me that's like, but there's a chance that he could have not slipped up. There's a chance that he could have kept it all cool and collected. Or there's a chance that he might not have even talked to her, because there might have been that part of him that's like, I'm more focused on her, but I'm not actually going to reach out to her. I'm not actually going to talk to her. And there was a chance that she might not even talk to him, but that ended up working out, and I guess he just sort of naturally let it happen to make Dex feel like it was natural. Because if all of a sudden like she just shows up like randomly without any reason and she's just there, I think Dex probably would have been like, okay, there's something else going on here. But because she was offered this job and she gets this job and it seems sort of natural, like, oh yeah, they wanted me to work here. I kind of feel like it's his ploy to make it say, okay, well, it just sort of naturally worked this way, and I didn't have any hand in this. So I feel like he's very cleverly set this up to lead Dex down this dark path. And we see him at the end listening to these tapes. I kind of actually thought that Fisk was going to mess up the tapes in some way because, going through his life, he saw that these tapes are what gave him the balance, listening to her, the therapist talk. So I kind of wondered if he was going to put it in and then like it was going to be messed up or something, but it's working. So I don't know if he's going to go off the deep end yet or if he's there but he's not quite over the edge and there's just going to be that one final push that sends him over. Because I honestly thought whenever the girl like left him at dinner, I thought that was going to be the push, but he managed to bring it back in, listen to the tapes before things got too bad. But then again, I mean, Fisk, he knows all the buttons to push. I think he's really figured him out after looking into all these papers. So I would not be surprised if either next episode or the episode after we see Fisk give him the final push to just send him off the deep end. But yeah, all in all, though, Dex's story very, very interesting. The stuff with Karen and Foggy, and then we have a little scene with Matt at the end. Very interesting stuff. I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was intriguing. It got my attention, and I don't know what they're going to do about it because it's not like they can just say, oh yeah, well, he's Daredevil. It's not like they can come at Nadeem with that argument and say he wouldn't help Fisk. He's the one that put him away. Because then you're just admitting he's a vigilante, and then once the FBI knows that Matt's a vigilante, well, then now there's nothing he can do. He's stuck. Because now the FBI knows what he's been doing, and vigilantism is still a criminal act. It's not helping Fisk, but it's not something that the FBI can just overlook either. So, yeah, it's a tough place to be in, and Fisk played this part of the story very well. Just the way he set it up and the way he really twisted the FBI to say, here, go after him. Now they're in a tough place, and, I don't know what to expect. We see Karen finally tells Foggy about what happened with the guy, Wesley, killing him in the first season, which honestly I couldn't remember if she had told anybody about it or not. Like, it's been a while since I've seen the first season. I might have to go back and sort of rewatch everything at some point just so I can see it all go hand in hand. But yeah, I couldn't really remember if she had told anybody about it, but she obviously had not told Foggy about it. So telling him now, that's kind of the pressure she feels on herself because they know that Wesley is missing, and she knows she's the one that did it. And the way she reacted, she kind of feels like she told Nadeem everything he needed to hear. So, yeah, I'll be curious to see what they do with them from here on out. Whether or not they just keep going up against Nadeem and trying to help him realize that he's being used, or if they team up with Matt at some point and kind of start helping him on the side and trying to stay out of the limelight because they don't want to be caught by the police. But yeah, I mean, it's exciting. It's definitely picked up since the first couple episodes, and we are getting into that part of the season where it's just, I want to watch the next episode. I'm ready to watch the next episode. Let's get into it. So, yeah, that's it for this one. On to the next one. See you there. And now episode 6, The Devil You Know. And breathe. That whole final sequence was just so well done. It got me on the edge of my seat. I was terrified to see what happened next. But yeah, again, more well-written story, building up this season, just continuing to show the moving pieces. Fisk somehow already has figured out what they plan to do with Jasper, getting him to talk at the bulletin, doing that on that whole interview, and then, basically exposing him for what he's doing. So he just has Dex dress up as Daredevil, which I will say,
I like the scene whenever he goes, like Dex goes in to see Fisk, and then he just pretty much calls him out. He says, "What? How much did you have to do to get that girl to work here? You think I don't know about counter intel?" And I'm thinking, okay, that's pretty cool. Like he knows Fisk is the one trying to push his buttons. But then whenever everything goes wrong, somebody leaks the story to the press and the FBI turns against him, he just sort of falls right into Fisk's arms and does exactly what Fisk wants him to. And I don't know. It seemed like that was a quick turn, because he sees what Fisk was trying to do with Julie, and then whenever the thing leaked to the press and he starts to get investigated, and they take away his badge and gun. I'm thinking, well, obviously, if Fisk is trying to push him, surely this is another attempt to push you even more. But instead of having that thought, he just instantly spirals, tries to kill himself, and then Fisk steps in right at the right moment, right before he kills himself, which I don't know how he managed to do that, time that perfectly. But then he just offers him a helping hand, and I don't know, my thought process is if you didn't trust him before, if you saw what he was doing before, how do you not see what he's doing now? And I get that he's going a little crazy because of everything that's happening, but I kind of feel like he's still got a little bit of sense, like he's still using a bit of logic, and I just feel like in this moment he just all of a sudden, no, it's all gone. All of the me catching what Fisk is trying to do, me catching what Fisk is trying to do, like push my buttons and stuff, all that's just gone. I'm like, okay, Fisk, I'll help you. I'll go and kill all these innocent people because you want me to, even though you're the one that put me in this position in the first place. It just felt more like in his situation, the spiral would be like, you're the one that caused all of this. You're the one that drove her away from me. Kind of like, honestly, what happened with Fisk and Vanessa in the first season, where Fisk saw everybody else around him as the problem, not himself. I kind of felt like that would kind of be Dex's scenario, where he sees Fisk as the one who drove her away, even though it's really his fault for stalking her and stuff. And he would see Fisk as the one, he's the one that lost me my job. He's the one that turned my world upside down. I figured he would go after Fisk, not work for him. So that's the only real issue I have with this episode. Is just I don't know if that makes sense with Dex's character. But aside from that, everything else is very well done. We see Nadim start to piece together that there is something else going on. And what it takes is them telling him about Jasper Evans, that they have him, that they found him, even though he's supposed to still be in prison. And even though, this whole attack at the end from Dex as Daredevil, it seems like Daredevil's the one that did all of this. Even though that all happens, I still kind of look at that and say, but still Nadim can see that there's something else here. And almost kind of feels like now would be a good time to tell him the whole truth. And kind of I know it's kind of a difficult scenario because it's like, again, you don't, like the FBI can't find out about Daredevil. You can't find out about Matt being Daredevil. But at the same time, now we've gotten to a point where, again, like Matt said several times in this episode, he's already on the run. He's already been like made an enemy by the cops, like Matt Murdock has. So what else has he got to lose? So I kind of feel like that would be a logical step for them, would just to be laid all out on the table, because I'm sure that's something Fisk would probably not account for, is Matt just telling the Nadim, hey, here's the truth. We need you to keep it within this circle because we can't have this information getting out. But here's the whole truth. Here's why I'm not the villain. Here's why Fisk is. Here's why that Daredevil is not the real Daredevil. Like, I feel like it would be a good time for them to do that. But at the same time, I also understand, like, why they probably won't do that, because, again, you don't want to be giving that information. Even if it is an FBI agent you think you can trust. But I definitely feel like this will be the start of Nadim realizing he's being played. It'll be the start of him sort of piecing together that Fisk is involved. Fisk is the one that's kind of pulling the strings in the background. Now, whether or not he thinks Matt and his friends are still involved somehow, whether he thinks Daredevil is a bad guy or not, I don't know how all that's going to play out. But I do feel like he'll start to question things more now after this episode. Especially, the fact that Daredevil comes in and kills Jasper Evans. It's kind of, I don't know. I don't really know how they're going to play that out, because in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, Daredevil's the one that put Fisk away, and Jasper Evans is the one that would help put Fisk back away again. So there would kind of be a lack of logic in that decision from if this were actually Daredevil. You know, thinking about it like that, there's no logical reason why he would kill Jasper Evans because Daredevil clearly wants Fisk put away. So that would lead, if I were a logical thinking person in this universe, that would lead me to think, okay, something's weird here. There's something different. But I know also Fisk is trying to play it where I'm actually not the bad guy here. I'm the good guy. And, Daredevil, he's trying to paint him out to be the villain, which I do find very interesting, finding that out, that he's going to basically paint Daredevil as the villain by making Dex be the new Daredevil and going around killing people. Like, I like that. That's a good twist. It lines up. It's very, very clever from Kingpin. And yeah, it's a good setup. I mean, it just, for the rest of the season now, I'm excited to see what they're going to do with this story, with Dex being the new Daredevil. And now Daredevil's got a target on his back from the FBI and everybody, which, he doesn't really have the costume, so it's not like, in Green Arrow, if Green Arrow was painted out to be a villain by somebody dressed up in a Green Arrow, he would still have to go out in that outfit and be a vigilante while dodging the police. Whereas here, he's now in the original black mask covering his face, so he's not really in the Daredevil outfit anymore. So them painting Daredevil as a villain doesn't affect him right now. But I don't know. I'm definitely interested to see what they're gonna do with that from now on. But yeah, that final fight scene was fantastic. Just all the clever little ways they played in with Bullseye and how he is able to just basically bounce anything off of any surface. He always hits his target, though. And there's a part of me that's like, okay, but they haven't shown that he's super powered or anything like that. So how does he know? Is he just that good where he's just, I'm going to throw this ball at the wall and I'm going to assume it's going to hit his target because I'm Bullseye, and that's just what happens. It always hits the target. I don't know. There's that part of me that's like, okay, that's a little silly. He doesn't know where Matt is in the room, and he just randomly throws things, and they keep hitting him because he's Bullseye. A little like, okay, that's kind of ridiculous, but it's still fun. It's still enjoyable to watch. It still made the fight very enjoyable. The point where Matt's trying to get at him, and he's just essentially picking up whatever random thing he can sharp and throwing it at him because he knows he's going to hit his target, which is making things more difficult for Matt. Yeah, so it was a fun fight scene, even if some of it was a little, you have to suspend your disbelief a little bit more because most of the time the fights are grounded in reality. I mean, they could not have done a one-shot take for this because you've got to do some CGI with him throwing the ball, it bouncing off the wall and hitting Matt. You can't do all that in one shot and be realistic with it. So it's going to be a little bit different than your typical, I think, Daredevil fight feel. But it still was fun. It still had me enjoying it. So yeah, all in all, it was a good fight scene, and yeah, it was a good episode. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to do from here on. The other thing that I wanted to talk about before wrapping this up is the stuff with Karen and Foggy and Matt. Their friendship and how they're handling it. They're doing a good job. And I talked about whenever we finally get that moment where they reunite, how are they going to handle it? Because I thought they'd handled their reactions so far before they found out Matt was still alive. I thought they handled the reactions very well. There was that frustration with him being gone, but also the sadness and the guilt and feeling like they could have done more. And then finding out he's alive, I thought that reaction was good too. Why isn't he talking to us? Why hasn't he reached out? I thought they handled all that well. And then they finally get to this episode, and I really like that conversation between Karen and Foggy in the car where he's telling her, look, Matt's not being the best friend right now. And that's on him. But if we don't help him and he ends up getting hurt or worse, then that's going to be on us. And just a good way to look at it. Yeah, he's not being the best friend, but we're still friends. Deep down, we still care about him. And what he's doing, the stuff that he's doing wrong, the mistakes he's making, that's all his fault. But if we don't do our part, if we don't help him, then that's our fault. And we don't want that to be on us. It was just a great way to look at it. I love that scene. I wanted to make sure I talked about it. So, but yeah, definitely enjoying it. I've got 7 more episodes to go. So can't wait to get to the end of it and then see how Punisher and Jessica Jones turned out. Which, one of those I'm not looking forward to as much, but we'll get there when we get there. But anyways, that's it for these 3 episodes. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on these episodes? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Daredevil reviews, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.